The city lights were cold and pale, shining on the dirty metal streets like weak stars. Wind blew through the broken alleys, carrying the smell of smoke, rust, and rotten food. Among the shadows, an alien mother held her little daughter close, trying to cover her with a thin cloth. The child's small feet were bare, pressed against the icy ground, turning purple from the cold. The mother whispered softly, her voice shaking, "Hold on, my little one, just a little longer." She walked from one food stall to another, her eyes begging for mercy. At every stall, the aliens pushed her away. Some laughed, some spat. "Worthless beggar," one alien shouted. "Take your dirty child away." Another sneered. "No one will waste food on you, go die in the alleys." The mother bowed her head in silence, but tears fell down her cheeks. Her daughter coughed weakly, holding her stomach that ached with hunger. The streets grew darker as the night deepened, shops closed, doors locked. Laughter echoed from the warm taverns where rich aliens drank, but for the mother and child there was only the empty road and the cold wind. The girl whispered, "Mama, I'm hungry. Please, just one hot meal." The words cut into the mother's heart like a blade. She pressed her daughter's head against her chest, wishing she could give her warmth. But she had nothing. No home, no money, no friend, only despair. Then a figure stopped nearby, tall, broad-shouldered, with a worn coat and boots that had walked far. He was human, one of the few in this city where humans were rare and often hated. He looked down at the child, his eyes narrowing at the sight of her purple feet. The mother stiffened, afraid he would also mock her, but the human didn't laugh. He didn't shout. Instead, he crouched to the child's level, his voice quiet. "She needs food now." The mother pulled her daughter back, whispering quickly, "We don't want trouble, sir." Her tone was sharp, but her hands trembled. The human stood again, reached into his pocket and pulled out a few credits. It was clear he didn't have much himself, but his steps carried him to the nearest open stall. The alien cook frowned when he saw him. "You again, human? What do you want?" The human pointed to the boiling pot. "One hot meal as fast as you can," the cook laughed. "For you? Or for those rats you stand near?" The human's jaw tightened, his eyes cold. "For them." Minutes later, a steaming bowl of soup was placed in his hands. The smell of broth and bread filled the freezing air. The mother stared in disbelief as the human placed it before her daughter. The little girl's eyes widened, her hands shaking as she touched the warm bowl. She ate quickly, burning her tongue but not caring. Tears rolled down her cheeks as warmth finally reached her body. The mother's lips trembled. She couldn't stop the flood of tears. Her daughter's life was being saved by this stranger. Nearby aliens pointed and laughed. "Look at him, feeding beggars. Humans really are fools. Maybe he wants something dirty in return." The words cut deep, but the human ignored them. His gaze stayed only on the child eating, making sure she didn't choke. When the bowl was empty, the little girl leaned against her mother, smiling weakly for the first time in days. The mother looked at the human, her voice breaking. Why would you do this?" Her eyes were filled with fear, shame, and something else. A spark of hope. The man said nothing at first, only took off his coat and draped it around the girl's shoulders. Finally he answered, "Because no child should freeze for a meal." The mother froze, her breath heavy. No one had ever spoken such words to her. Her people had turned their backs, strangers had mocked her. But here was a human, giving kindness without demand. Her lips trembled, and in desperation, she whispered the only offer she could think of. "If you want, I will be yours tonight in return for this kindness." The human's eyes hardened, but not with greed. He shook his head slowly. "Keep your dignity. I don't want that." The mother's tears spilled again, this time heavier. She clutched, her daughter close, whispering thanks, and for the first time in a long time she felt something she had forgotten. A small flame of hope burning against the frozen streets. The night did not grow warmer. The frozen wind still cut through the empty streets. The little girl leaned against her mother, wrapped in the human's coat, breathing softly as the warmth of food made her eyelids heavy. The mother's heart was heavy with shame and confusion. She had offered herself in desperation, But the human had refused. No one had ever refused before. No one had ever helped without demanding a price. Her hands shook as she whispered, "Why would you waste your money on us?" The human did not answer right away. He stood at the edge of the street scanning the alleys. The city was dangerous at night, and he knew that kindness in a place like this was like bleeding in the water. It drew predators. His hand brushed against, the small knife hidden in his boot, a habit born from surviving too many dark places. Finally he turned and said softly, "Because I remember what hunger feels like, and I swore I'd never ignore it again." The mother blinked, her lips parting, but she found no words. Her daughter stirred, whispering in her sleep, "Mama, warm, full." The sound cut the silence, and the human's expression softened for the first time. He crouched, pulling the coat tighter around the child. "She'll sleep better now." The mother's eyes filled with tears, but her voice trembled with suspicion. "Are you some kind of saint, human? No one helps for nothing here." The man gave a dry laugh, bitter and tired. "Saints don't wander these streets. I'm just someone who knows suffering when he sees it." In the distance, two drunk aliens staggered past, their eyes catching. On the small group, one nudged the other, pointing. "Look, the human has picked up a stray." The other smirked. "He'll regret it when they rob him blind." Their laughter echoed as they disappeared, but the mother's face burned with shame. She whispered again, "If you don't want me, then why?" The human looked at her directly this time, his voice firm. "Because I don't trade kindness for flesh. I don't need that. I just need to know your child won't die tonight." The mother felt as if the ground beneath her shifted. No one had ever spoken like that to her. Not her people, not strangers, not anyone. She lowered her head, clutching her daughter close. "Then what do you want?" she asked, almost afraid of the answer. The man straightened, his face in the half-light, shadows sharp across his jaw. "I want to see her smile again," he said simply, nodding toward the girl. "That's enough." For a moment, silence ruled. Broken only by the hum of neon lights and the faraway howl of machines, the mother bit her lip, trying to hold back sobs. Her mind screamed at her that this was dangerous, that no human or alien gave without wanting something back. But her heart, long buried under layers of pain, told her that maybe, just maybe, this man was different. The human checked his pockets, only a few credits left. He sighed, knowing he had little for himself, but he walked to another stall. This one sold bread, hard, dry loaves, but filling. The alien vendor frowned. "Back again? You must be desperate." The man ignored the insult, dropping his last credits on the counter. 2 loaves. The vendor shoved them at him with a smirk, muttering about stupid humans. When he returned, he handed 1 loaf to the mother, pressing the other into her daughter's small hands even though she was half asleep. The girl clutched it like treasure, whispering, "Thank you, Papa." In her dreams, the word made the mother stiffen, her chest tightening. She turned to the man, her voice breaking. "She called you." "Papa." The man's eyes flickered, pain passing through them like lightning. He looked away, his jaw tight. "Let her dream. Dreams don't hurt anyone." The mother studied him quietly, noticing the scars on his hands, the tired lines around his eyes. This was not a rich man, not a man with power or wealth, but there was something unshakable in the way he stood. Something that whispered of battles fought and survived. She asked carefully, "Do you have children?" His silence was heavy, his face unreadable. Finally he answered, voice low, "I did. Once, nothing more. No details." But the grief in his tone told her enough. The girl shifted again, hugging the loaf of bread like a doll, her tiny smile glowing in the dark. The mother closed her eyes, whispering, "You saved her life tonight." The man shook his head. "No, I just bought her time. But time is worth more than gold in this place." He glanced at the mother, his tone sharp. "Tomorrow she'll need more than soup and bread. Where do you go when the night ends?" The mother lowered her head, shame flooding her again. "Nowhere. We have no home." The man's lips pressed into a hard line, his fists clenching at his side. Leaving them here meant death. but taking them meant danger for him. He stood for a long time, staring at the cold stars above. Finally, he muttered, "Damn it all." Turning back, he said, "Then you'll stay with me for now." The mother's breath caught. "Stay with you?" His eyes were steady, not demanding, not cruel, just firm. "Yes. Until she can walk without freezing. Until she can laugh without starving. After that, you decide where to go." The mother hugged her daughter tightly, her heart racing. Was this truly kindness, or a trap waiting to close? She could not know. But her child's small smile gave her courage. She nodded slowly. "All right, we'll stay." And so on that frozen night, beneath the cruel neon lights of a city that had no mercy, a human made a choice. Not for profit, not for gain, but for a child with purple feet and a desperate mother who had nothing left but hope. The mother hugged her daughter tightly, her heart racing. Was this truly kindness, or a trap waiting to close? She could not know, but her child's small smile gave her courage. She nodded slowly. "All right, we'll stay." And so, on that frozen night, beneath the cruel neon lights of a city that had no mercy, a human made a choice. Not for profit, not for gain, but for a child with purple feet and a desperate mother who had nothing left but hope. A choice that would change all of their lives forever. The small fire burned low in the corner of the abandoned warehouse, its light flickering against broken walls and shattered glass. The human had found the place after leading the mother and child through dark alleys, careful to avoid the gangs that roamed the city at night. It was no palace, but it kept out the biting wind, and for the first time in weeks, the little girl slept without shivering. Her soft breathing filled the silence, clutching the dry bread he had given her earlier like it was a treasure. The mother sat across from the human, her arms wrapped around her knees, staring at him through the dim glow. She was not used to silence. Silence always meant danger, but this silence felt strange, heavy, but not cruel. Finally, she whispered, "You refused my offer." Why? No one else would refuse. The human's eyes stayed on the fire, the flames dancing in his reflection. Because pity is not love, and kindness is not a trade. His words were sharp, firm, and final, but they carried a weight she could not deny. The mother lowered her head, biting her lip until it almost bled. Her people had taught her that nothing came without a price, that mercy was always a mask for control. But this man, he confused her, broke all the rules she knew. She asked again softly, "Then what do you want from us?" The human turned, his scarred hands resting on his knees, his voice steady. "Nothing. I just want her to live. That's all." Her throat tightened, her chest heavy with emotions she could not name. The girl stirred in her sleep, murmuring, "Warm, Papa." The mother's breath caught at that word again, a word that should have broken the man, but instead he closed his eyes. As though it stabbed into an old wound, she whispered carefully, "She sees something in you, something safe." The man did not answer, but his jaw tightened, his silence louder than words. The night stretched long, filled with the distant howls of drunks, the grinding roar of alien machines. The mother thought of her past, of the home she had lost, of the betrayal that had driven her to these streets. She wanted to tell him, to share the weight of her story, but fear chained her tongue. Why should she trust him fully? Why should she believe that his kindness would last beyond tonight? And yet, she felt the spark of hope inside her chest, faint but alive. The human shifted, pulling his coat tighter around the girl before leaning against the wall. His voice came, low, almost like he was speaking to the fire itself. "When I was a boy, I starved too." The mother's eyes widened. She lifted her head slowly. He continued, "On a world not far from here, war burned everything. I lost my family. I wandered, hungry, waiting for death. No one helped. No one cared." He paused, his hand tightening into a fist. "I survived, but only barely. And I swore if I ever saw that same hunger in another child's eyes, I would not walk away." The mother's heart ached at his words. The pain in his tone was raw, not an act, not a trick. For the first time, she understood why he had stopped, why he had chosen them instead of saving his credits. He was not just helping them. He was fighting his own past through their survival. Her lips trembled, and she whispered, "Then we are bound by pain, you and I." The human finally looked at her, his eyes reflecting both fire and shadow. "No, pain is what brought us here. But hope is what keeps us alive." She lowered her gaze again, unable to meet his eyes for long. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever given her the choice to hold dignity even in her lowest state. Her people had stripped her pride, the streets had stolen her faith, but this man, this human, had given back a piece of her soul without asking anything in return. The girl coughed softly in her sleep, clutching the bread tighter. The mother rushed to her side, brushing her hair, whispering softly until the girl settled again. When she turned back, she found the human watching, his expression calm but guarded. She said quietly, "I don't know how to thank you." "I have nothing." The human's voice was steady. "You don't need to thank me, just survive, both of you. That's thanks enough." But deep inside, the mother's heart twisted with a new feeling, fear, not of him, but of losing him. What if he left tomorrow? What if he changed his mind? What if this moment of safety was only a dream that would vanish in the daylight? Her hands shook as she whispered, "If you leave us, she will die." The man leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "I won't leave. Not until she can stand strong. You have my word." A word. A promise. The mother felt her chest tighten as though those simple words carried more power than chains. In a city where no one trusted anyone, where every deal came with blood and betrayal, this man's promise felt heavier than iron. She studied his face, scarred and weary but steady, and she realized something terrifying. She wanted to believe him, more than she had wanted anything in years. Outside, footsteps echoed faintly, voices murmuring in the dark. The human's head snapped up, his hand moving to the knife at his boot, his body tense. He motioned for silence, his eyes warning the mother not to make a sound. The voices grew closer, rough laughter and the sound of metal scraping against stone. The mother's blood ran cold. She recognized them, thugs who hunted the desperate at night. She clutched her daughter tighter, her heart racing. The human's eyes narrowed, his grip on the knife firm, and he whispered so quietly it was almost lost in the crackle of the fire, "Stay behind me." In that moment, the mother understood. His promise was not just words. It was a vow he was ready to fight for, bleed for, maybe even die for. Not for wealth, not for flesh, but for a single child whose feet had turned purple in the cold, and for her, a broken woman who had found something she thought was long dead. A reason to hope again. The voices outside faded slowly, drifting back into the maze of streets. The mother did not breathe until silence returned, her arms still wrapped around her daughter. The little girl stirred but did not wake, lost in the first peaceful sleep she'd had in weeks. The human lowered his knife, but he did not relax. His eyes kept scanning the broken walls as though expecting danger to return. The mother finally whispered, "You live like a soldier." Her words were soft, but they cut into the quiet like a blade. The human didn't answer right away, only moved closer to the fire and poked the dying embers with a piece of metal. Sparks leapt up, lighting the lines of his face. Old scars ran across. His skin, marks of battles long past. He said flatly, "I was once." The mother hugged her knees, staring at him. "You fight like one. You guard like one. Even when you feed a child, your hand stays ready for war." Her voice trembled, but there was no accusation in it, only a strange mix of respect and fear. The man gave a bitter smile, though it carried no joy. That is what war does. It never lets you rest. For a long moment, only the fire spoke, crackling against the cold air. The mother hesitated, then whispered, "I, too, was not always like this. Her voice was so low it almost vanished, but the human's eyes turned toward her sharply. She looked down at the child sleeping in her arms, her hands shaking as she stroked her daughter's hair. Once, I was the daughter of a noble house. We had a home, servants, respect. I wore silks instead of rags, ate feasts instead of scraps. Her words carried no pride, only grief, as if speaking them made her wounds bleed again. The human listened in silence, his eyes steady, not mocking, not doubting. The mother swallowed hard, tears burning in her eyes. But power makes enemies. My husband was gone to war and I was left alone with her. She brushed the child's hair gently. My only treasure. Her voice cracked. One night my own kin sold me out. They said I was unfit, a burden. They stripped me of everything and threw us into the streets. Her tears finally spilled, falling onto the girl's forehead. They told me she would not survive the winter, that it would be kinder to let her die. But I could not let her go. The human's hands tightened into fists, anger flickering in his eyes. He muttered under his breath, "Your own blood did this to you." The mother laughed bitterly, though it was broken. Blood means nothing when greed is stronger. We were less than dirt to them. She wiped her eyes roughly with the back of her hand. Since then, I begged. I crawled. I sold whatever dignity I had left to keep her breathing. Until tonight, when you gave her back warmth. The human's gaze softened, though his jaw stayed hard. You should not have had to sell yourself for survival, he said firmly. That is not living. That is slavery by another name. The mother's heart pounded. No one had ever spoken those words to her. For years, every stranger told her the same thing, that her worth was nothing, that her daughter was a curse. But this human, this wanderer, spoke as if she still had value, as if she was still someone. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Why do you speak to me as if I am more than a beggar?" The man looked at her sharply, his voice like steel. "Because you are. Because she needs you strong. And because I see more than rags when I look at you. I see someone who refuses to surrender." Her chest ached with emotions she did not understand, a storm of shame, relief, and fragile hope. She looked at the ground, whispering, "You give me words I don't deserve." The human shook his head. "You deserve more than words. You deserve a life where your child doesn't freeze in alleys." The fire burned lower, shadows stretching across the walls. The mother leaned her head back, staring at the cracked ceiling, her voice weak but steady. Do you think we can ever climb out of this pit?" The man was quiet for a long moment, then answered, "Yes, but not alone." His words struck her deeply. She had carried everything alone for so long that the thought of sharing the burden felt impossible. And yet sitting here, she began to believe it might not be a lie. The girl stirred again, murmuring in her sleep, "Mama, warm. Papa." The mother's eyes filled with tears at that word once more, but this time she did not fight it. She looked at the human, her voice fragile. "She sees you as something more already." The man's face darkened, shadows hiding. His expression, he whispered almost to himself, "I couldn't save my own child, maybe I can save hers." The mother froze, her heart racing. "You had a child?" she asked gently. The human didn't answer immediately, his eyes fixed on the fire. Finally, he nodded once, a ghost of pain flashing across his face. "I did. War took her, and my wife. I buried them both with my hands." His voice broke slightly, though his face stayed hard. "That's why I swore never to walk away again when I see hunger or cold in a child's eyes. I couldn't save mine, but I can save yours." The mother covered her mouth, tears pouring freely now. Her heart ached for his loss. But at the same time, something inside her shifted. This man was not just kind. He was broken too. Broken in a way that mirrored her own pain, and somehow that made his promise stronger than any gold, stronger than any oath her people had ever sworn. She whispered, voice shaking, "Then, maybe we are not alone anymore." The human finally looked at her, his eyes dark but steady. "No, not anymore." Outside the city roared with laughter. cruelty, and the endless hunger of the night. But inside that broken warehouse, a bond was forming, fragile but real, born not from pity but from shared scars. The mother knew the road ahead would not be easy. Danger would come, enemies would rise. But for the first time since her fall from grace, she felt a shadow of hope stretch into the future, because she no longer carried her burden alone. The city never truly slept, even in the deepest hours of the night. Beyond the broken warehouse, neon lights flickered and alien voices echoed. Deals were struck in shadows, knives gleamed, and every corner hid hungry eyes. The human knew this, which was why he barely slept, sitting against the wall with his knife in hand. The mother dozed lightly, her daughter curled up in his coat. There, breathing soft and fragile like a fragile flame against the cold. When morning came, the streets awoke with chaos, vendors shouting, drunks stumbling home, and guards shaking down the poor for coins they didn't have. The human led the mother and child through the maze of alleys, keeping them close. His eyes never stopped scanning, always watching for danger. But danger had already found them, and it wore a cruel smile. At a busy corner where gangs controlled the stalls, a heavy shadow fell across their path. A tall alien stepped forward, his skin dark and ridged like stone, his tusked mouth curling into a smirk. Two more thugs flanked him, their armor mismatched but their weapons sharp. The mother stiffened, her grip on her daughter tightening. The human's eyes narrowed, his hand twitching near the knife hidden in his coat. "Well, well," the tusked alien drawled, his voice oily and mocking. "A human playing the hero in my streets. You've made quite a spectacle feeding beggars." The other thugs chuckled, their eyes flashing greed as they looked at the mother and child. The alien leader leaned closer, his breath foul. "But kindness here has a price, human. Lucky for you, I'm a generous man." The human stayed silent, his jaw locked. The alien's grin widened, showing rows of jagged teeth. "Give me the woman and the child. You walk away rich. More credits than you'll ever see again." The mother gasped softly, her eyes wide with terror, pulling her daughter behind her. The alien raised his thick hand, rubbing two fingers together. "I'll even throw in a place for you at my table. No one will touch you if you're under my wing." The human's eyes burned cold, his voice low and dangerous. "They are not for sale." The laughter around them grew louder, cruel and sharp. One of the thugs sneered. "Here, that? He thinks he owns them already." Another hissed, "Then maybe we just take them and cut him down." The tusked alien studied the human, his grin fading into something darker. "You're bold, human. I'll give you that. But boldness without strength is suicide. Think carefully. Why die for them? She's nothing but a fallen whore, and the child is half dead already." The mother's face went pale, shame and fury clashing in her eyes. She looked down, unable to speak, her body trembling. The human's hand moved to his knife, slowly, deliberately. "Say that again," he said in a voice so quiet it cut through the laughter like ice. The alien tilted his head, amused. "What? That she's worthless? Or that the child's a burden? You can't protect them forever. Better to hand them over to someone who knows how to use them." The human's knife flashed in the dim light, but he didn't strike yet. His eyes locked on the alien, cold and unyielding. "Touch them, and you'll learn exactly how long forever is." The laughter died. The street grew tense. Even the crowd of bystanders who had gathered to watch fell silent. The tusked alien's grin returned, though thinner now. Hiding anger, "Careful, human. You've just declared war you cannot win." He waved his hand, and his thugs stepped back, though their glares promised blood. "Think on my offer. When hunger bites again, when the cold eats her feet to the bone, you'll come crawling. And I'll be waiting." With that, the gang melted back into the crowd, their laughter trailing behind them like poison. The mother collapsed against the wall, holding her daughter tightly, her breath ragged, her eyes filled with tears of both relief and dread. "You should have taken his offer. At least you would have lived." The human sheathed his knife with a sharp motion, his eyes still locked on the alley where the gang had vanished. "I told you before, I don't trade lives. Not yours, not hers. Not for all the credits in this. Cursed city? The mother shook her head, tears streaming. But you've put yourself in danger now. They won't forget this. They'll come again. The man finally turned to her, his expression unreadable. Let them come. I fought worse than street thugs, but inside, he knew the danger was real. This city was not forgiving, and enemies like that would not stop until they owned everything or destroyed everything. The girl tugged on his sleeve softly, her small voice weak but clear. Papa, are we safe? The human crouched, meeting her wide eyes. He hesitated, then forced his voice steady. As long as I breathe, you're safe. The child smiled faintly, leaning against him, and the mother's heart twisted. This man had no reason to fight for them, and yet he did, without hesitation, without reward. But deep inside her chest, fear coiled tight, because now she knew. This was no longer just about surviving the cold. They had caught the attention of the city's predators, and in a world where mercy was weakness, a promise like his would be tested with blood. That night back in the broken warehouse, the mother whispered while the girl slept, "You could have walked away. Why didn't you?" The human stared into the darkness, his knife resting across his lap. His voice was low, filled with something heavier than anger. Because I remember what it feels like to be left behind, and I'll be damned before I let it happen to her. The mother closed her eyes, tears slipping silently down her face. The dangerous offer still echoed in her ears, a shadow waiting for them in the days to come. But for now, she had only one truth to hold on to. This human's promise was stronger than her fear. The warehouse was quiet again, but the silence no longer felt safe. It was heavy, waiting, filled with the promise of footsteps that would come sooner or later. The human sat awake, his knife across his lap, his eyes scanning the broken walls and cracked windows. The mother dozed in fits, holding her daughter close, but every sound made her flinch. She knew the gang would return. They always did when they smelled weakness, and now, thanks to the human's defiance, they would come not just for her, but for him too. When the second night came, the wind howled through the city. Cold air sliced through the ruins, rattling the boards they had used to cover the windows. The child coughed softly in her sleep, her breath misting in the air. The human stood and adjusted the small fire, feeding it scraps of wood he'd scavenged. He moved quietly, like a predator in his own den, setting broken bottles at the entrance. He tied a rope of rags across the doorframe, balancing rusty cans on top. Every sound, every trap, every shadow mattered, because he knew they were coming, and they did, when the night was at its deepest. The sound came first, a can falling, rolling loudly across the stone floor. The mother's eyes snapped open, fear flooding her chest. The human raised a hand, signaling silence, his knife already in his other hand. Then came the footsteps, heavy and slow, followed by the cruel laugh of the tusked alien leader. "Well, human, you should have taken my offer." The door burst inward, wood splintering as three thugs pushed through. One carried a metal pipe, another had claws sharpened with steel tips. The tusked alien himself entered last, his bulk filling the doorway like a monster from a nightmare. The mother clutched her daughter tightly, pressing her back into the corner. The girl woke with a start, whimpering, "Mama, cold." But the mother hushed her, tears streaking her face. The human stepped forward, blocking the path between them and the attackers. His coat hung loose, his face hard as stone. "This is your last chance," the tusked alien sneered. "Give them to me and you live." The man's voice was calm but sharp as steel. "No." The fight began in an instant. The thug with the pipe swung first, a wide arc meant to crush his skull. The human ducked, driving his knife upward into the thug's arm, the blade sinking deep. The thug screamed, stumbling back, blood spilling onto the floor. Another rushed in with clawed hands, slashing wildly. The human caught the first strike on his forearm, blood splattering, then shoved the thug into the wall. Smashing his head against stone until he fell limp, the tusked alien laughed, stepping closer. "Not bad, human, but let's see how long you last." He grabbed a broken beam and swung it like a hammer. The human rolled aside, the beam shattering stone where he had stood. The ground shook with the force, dust filling the air. The mother gasped, holding her daughter tighter, praying silently. The human struck back, slashing at the alien's side, but the blade glanced off thick armor plates under his skin. The alien roared, swinging again, the beam catching the human's shoulder. He fell hard, pain searing through him. But he gritted his teeth and forced himself up. The alien loomed over him, grinning. "You can't win, human. You'll die for nothing." The man spat blood, his voice low. "Not nothing. For them?" He hurled his knife at the alien's face. The tusked brute raised his arm, deflecting it, but in that moment the human lunged, grabbing the broken beam with both hands. With a roar, he drove it forward into the alien's chest. The impact sent both of them crashing into the wall, the beam splintering under the force. The alien snarled, claws raking across the human's side, blood spilling, but the man didn't let go. He pushed harder, driving the jagged wood deeper until the alien staggered, choking. The other thugs, seeing their leader falter, hesitated. The mother seized her chance, grabbing a loose rock from the floor and hurling it at one thug's head. It struck true, stunning him. The human turned, blood dripping from his wounds, and drove a kick into the thug's knee, snapping it backward. The thug collapsed with a scream, crawling toward the door. The tusked alien staggered, his breath ragged. "You fool. You'll die," he gasped, before falling to his knees. The human yanked the broken beam free, and the brute toppled face first onto the ground, unmoving. Silence returned, broken only by the mother's ragged breaths and the child's sobs. The human dropped the beam, swaying on his feet, his shirt torn and soaked in blood. The mother rushed forward, catching his arm before he fell, her voice panicked. "You're hurt, you're bleeding so much." He forced a weak smile, shaking his head. "I've bled worse, but you're safe." The little girl crawled in too, his arms hugging him tightly despite the blood, her tiny voice trembling. "Papa, don't leave us." The man closed his eyes, pain racking his body, but he pulled her close, whispering, "I'm not going anywhere." The mother's tears fell freely, her heart pounding with both fear and awe. He had nearly died for them. A man with no reason to care, no promise of reward in this cruel city. No one fought for the weak, no one except him. As she pressed cloth to his wounds, her voice shook but carried a new strength. "You fought for us. Now I will fight for you." The warehouse smelled of smoke and blood, the floor littered with broken weapons and fallen enemies. But in that place of ruin, something new had been born, not just survival, but a bond, sealed in pain, in blood, and in the promise of warmth that neither of them would ever abandon again. The dawn came slowly, spilling pale light across the broken warehouse. The fire had died, leaving only ashes glowing faintly. Blood stained the floor where the thugs had fallen, and the smell of iron lingered in the air. The human sat slumped against the wall, his wounds bandaged with strips of cloth the mother had torn from her own dress. His face was pale, but his eyes stayed open, sharp as ever, watching the doorway. The little girl lay curled against his chest, her tiny hand gripping his torn shirt. Every now and then she stirred, mumbling in her sleep. The mother sat close, pressing more cloth to his shoulder, her eyes swollen from tears but burning with resolve. She whispered, "You should be resting. You've lost too much blood." The human gave a faint smile, his voice, "Rough, I can't rest yet. Someone has to make sure no more rats crawl in." Her heart ached seeing him like this, broken, bleeding, but still unyielding. She touched his arm gently. "You nearly died for us." "Why?" He looked at her, his eyes tired but steady. "Because you're not trash and she's not a burden. You both deserve more than this." The words struck her harder than any blow she had ever taken. She bowed her head, whispering, "No one has ever said that to me, not once." The girl stirred again, opening her eyes. When she saw him awake, she smiled faintly, her voice weak but clear. "Papa, you're still here." The human's throat tightened, but he forced his voice steady. "Told you I wasn't going anywhere." She snuggled closer into his arms, safe even in the ruins. And in that moment, the mother realized, This man wasn't just saving them. He was slowly becoming part of them. When the day grew brighter, the city stirred with its usual noise. Word spread quickly of the fight. Whispers of a human who had stood against the tusked gang leader and lived. Some mocked him, saying he was foolish. Others muttered that he would not last long, but a few spoke in awe, wondering if perhaps there was more to this human than anyone knew. The mother knew what those whispers meant. Danger would come again, stronger and hungrier. She turned to the human, her voice urgent. "We can't stay here. If they return with more men, we'll be slaughtered." The human nodded weakly. "You're right. We move tonight." She frowned. "Move where?" "There's nowhere safe in this city." For the first time, a hint of mystery flickered in his eyes. "There is one place." That night, when the streets grew dark, they slipped out of the warehouse. The human leaned heavily on the mother's shoulder, but his steps never faltered. The little girl walked beside them, holding his hand tightly, her bare feet wrapped in cloth to keep the cold away. They passed through alleys where gangs watched them with hungry eyes, but no one dared step forward. Rumors of the dead tusked leader had already spread, and fear held them back. Finally, they reached the edge of the city, where the metal towers crumbled into ruins and the lights faded into shadows. The human led them to a hidden door, half buried under rubble. He pulled it open with a grunt, revealing a passage that smelled of dust and earth. The mother hesitated, her voice trembling. "What is this place?" The man answered simply. "A shelter, old forgotten. I used it once when I had nowhere else to go. It's not much, but it's safe." Inside, the passage opened into a small chamber carved into stone. There were old supplies, blankets, a cracked water barrel, even a few tools. The girl gasped softly, her eyes wide. "Mama, it's warm." The mother sank to her knees, overwhelmed, pressing her forehead to the ground. She whispered, "You've given us more than food, more than fire. You've given us a home." The human leaned against the wall, exhaustion pulling at him. But when he saw the child smile, her tiny feet wrapped warmly in cloth, his chest loosened. For the first time in years, he felt something he thought was lost. Peace. He murmured, almost to himself, "Maybe. This time I can protect them." Days passed, and slowly the chamber became more than shelter. It became theirs. The mother cleaned it with bare hands, scrubbing dirt away. The girl decorated the walls with chalk drawings she found in the rubble. Flowers, stars, and stick figures holding hands. The human repaired what he could, fashioning a crude bed from broken planks, building a fire pit with stones. Every small act stitched them closer together. Every moment turned strangers into something more, into family, but shadows still lingered beyond the safety of stone. The gangs hadn't forgotten, and the city's cruelty never slept. The human knew battles lay ahead, more blood, more pain. Yet as he watched the girl laughing softly for the first time, her tiny feet warm again, he felt strength return. The mother caught his gaze, her voice soft but fierce. "You saved us, not just from death, but from despair. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." The human nodded slowly, his jaw tight, but his eyes shone with a fire that had long been buried. For too long he had carried his grief alone, wandering from place to place, never belonging. Now, in the quiet warmth of this hidden chamber, he had found something he thought was gone forever. A reason to stay, a reason to fight, a reason to live. And so the story of one hot meal, one desperate night, became more than survival. It became the beginning of a bond stronger than chains, forged in fire, blood, and hope. The girl, once starving and forgotten, now slept peacefully with warmth on her feet. The mother, once broken and shamed, now held her head higher, her eyes fierce again. And the human, who had lost everything, now found a new family to protect. Not by pity, not by bargain, but by choice. A choice that turned frozen streets into a home at last.